do it all.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's
I
just-
got it. I got it under control. I'll be disciplined.
We should be going live.
Where's Laura?
We are live.
Good evening, and welcome to the special session of the Warwick School Committee on Thursday, October 1st, 2020, pursuant to Executive Order Number 2025, issued by the Governor of the State of Rhode Island. This meeting will be conducted by electronic communication only. Members of the public wishing to access this meeting may do so at https://YOU/TU:/NGHZ. That's H as in Henry and Z as in zero, M0WFQDM. At this time, I will call the meeting to order. And I make a motion to vote to go into closed session for discussion and/or action regarding those items of business exempt from open meetings under general laws of Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5, A1, A2, A4, A8, and A9.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We're in executive.
Just give me a minute. I'll push you into the breakout room.
Thank you. It's gonna
Yep.
Sound check in the Gorton room. Anyone? Lee Bueller?
You're good.
Yep, we can hear you and you're live right now.
Yep.
It says 7 PM for return.
Technically, it's approximately, but it's only
Oh,
5
that's
minutes.
Good evening. We are now back in public session. And at this time, I would ask that everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I would ask that Mr. Testa please lead us.
Make sure I'm unmuted. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to the open session of the public meeting of October 1. At this time, we will vote to seal the minutes of executive session. I move so.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. 4-0. There were no votes taken in executive session. We now move to public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment may do so by emailing written comments to publiccomment@warwickschools.org. Please submit comments by noon of the meeting day in order to ensure receipt. Just bear with me until I get to the public comments. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. Having trouble getting in. For some reason, I'm not able to get into the folder. I am not pro with this. I have the pro, yeah. Get into that folder. We are without our reader this evening, and as such, we have to get this done. Why don't we take a break and come back in 3 minutes at 7:05 so that we can get this technology straightened out.
Do we need a motion for that or anything, Mr. Hennius? No, we can just,
I think we just hold the meeting for, the meeting's still open. It's just
okay.
technically stopped for the time being.
Can folks hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. We're just waiting on Attorney Hennius's return. We are all back. We will proceed with public comment. Thank you to Mr. Taylor for his assistance. The first email is from Stephen Blanchett. And Mr. Blanchett says, my name is Stephen Blanchett. I am the father of 3 children in the WPS. I have a 7th grader at Vets, as well as a 3rd grader and 1st grader at Oakland Beach. I am writing today based on the recommendations of other parents. I have so many concerns with distance learning. The biggest underlying concern is that distance learning should never be an option for the education of our children. I have rolled with things up to this point. However, I can no longer stand idly by as I watch my kids lose their education. I am not a teacher. I have not been trained nor educated as a teacher. I, as well as many parents, are not what any of our kids need now. They need face-to-face interaction with the teachers. In the almost 1 year they have been at home performing distance learning, they have gone from 180 days a year in school for 6 hours a day to at most 1.5 hours of work spread across the entire day. The amount of learning that can happen in this time frame pales in comparison to what they should normally be receiving. I can tell that my kids are regressing in their overall knowledge. The teachers are set to fail these kids with such a schedule. It makes me feel as though the teachers are not doing anything and that I should be getting their salaries. As a parent with 3 kids in different grades, I am pulled in many different directions at one time during the school day. I am fortunate that I have a home with multiple computers and high-speed internet, as I cannot imagine how difficult this would be without those luxuries. With multiple children in the house, they are easily distracted, and paying attention to lessons is virtually impossible, pun intended. I also have a 3-year-old at home whom is forced to remain away from his siblings and to play quiet in his room without my utmost attention, which hurts his own growth. I am sure you have heard multiple parents' concerns that echo my own. I know I am not the only one in this situation. As I lay in bed at night awake, thinking about my children's overall education, I cannot help but feel that if they are going to regress by doing the shell of school, they may just be better not even dealing with these games. I cannot help but feel the best option for my children would be to just take them out of school this year, and next year, God willing, things return to normalcy. They can begin their current grades. That leads me to a fear that if I were to take such extreme measures, the school system would only move them ahead to the next grade based on their age next year. I was informed by a 4th grade teacher last year that Warwick does not hold kids back ever anymore. Someone decided the stigma from peers was more important than a proper education. Does this make sense? This leads me to my next concern. You individuals are judge, jury, and executioners for an entire city of children. You do not know the individual needs and services for every child. How can a blanket decision be made for them all? Who do you think you people are, to be making a decision as to what is best for my children? Things should be left up to parents. A survey should go out asking what we parents feel would be best for our kids. My answer should be blatantly obvious. The education of our children outweighs the potential for illness. All this change is more damaging for our children in ways beyond any one person can comprehend. As judge, jury, and executioners, as a grading rubric, the overall grade you all receive would be executioners. Things such as timeframes for air filters should have been thought of and handled over the summer break, not attempted at the beginning of a school year, drug out by bureaucratic red tape, likely mismanaged, creating further delays and disgust. I cannot stress enough that every Warwick child is being hurt by this new society. You can limit the hurt by facilitating what is viewed to be best for each child by those that know them best, their parents. I have explored the option of suing the WPS, as Governor Raimondo has said is an option. What good can come of that? Nothing. My kids won't be in schools tomorrow. Monetary settlements don't give them back a year of lost education. No, much like this email, likely nothing will come of it. You all clearly do not care of the opinions of one person. You have some semblance of power, no matter how small, and are not going to allow a peon such as myself to tell you how to do anything. You may be asking, why are you writing us then? I do it out of a recommendation for many other parents, on the hope and prayer that perhaps any word may strike a chord. Prove me wrong in my statement that you do not care about these Warwick children. Don't make me pull my children out of the Warwick Public Schools and hold them back myself, or make me move away from Warwick because of a horrid public school system. Rant over. Regards, Stephen Blanchett. Thank you, Mr. Blanchett. The next public comment comes from Christine Ellingwood. Dear members of the school committee and Superintendent Thornton, I am struggling to understand why we are now entering October with not one child stepping foot in a regular education classroom. I invite you to explain to my 11th grader, who was in tears last night, why you cannot get them to school any faster. She has continuously been a straight A student, but not through distance learning. The tears she had last night for the fear that distance learning is ruining her changes, of going to college, to the college of her dreams, because she is not getting the education she needs or deserves. This city is letting our children down. The hours in class via distance learning are not even equal to what they would have with in-person learning. It is embarrassing to say that you are from Warwick, especially now when our school committee members are in the news or constantly not listening to or paying attention to what the governor has been recommending. You must do better. You have to get all kids back to school. It is imperative to each and every Warwick student, not just half or elementary, but all of Warwick children. They need to in-person learning, and I truly hope that you can expedite this process and do what is best for all the children in Warwick. Thank you, Christine Englewood. Thank you, Christine. This public comment is from Jen Goff. Dear Mr. Thornton and school committee members, my name is Jennifer Goff, and I am a parent of a second grader in Warwick Public Schools. I'm writing to you to ask for your help. There are many parents of students in Warwick Public Schools, ranging from kindergarten through grade 12, that want to see our students back in school for in-person learning. As you know, we have been told that a hybrid model will start potentially by the end of this month for elementary students. But with kindergarten now being delayed, who knows if the end of October will be a possibility for other grades to re-enter. We know this is a start. However, we also know there is no plan from either you, the superintendent, or the school committee for full in-person learning. There are many struggles from parents all over the city, whether it be special education students who need to be co-taught in classroom or high school students who need to prepare for college. You need to know that distance learning is not going well and that our students deserve a plan for full in-person learning. We would also like a definitive answer as to why other districts have managed to return and Warwick has not, and why your administration still has not unveiled a plan for full return, leaving families wondering how their children are to progress academically when 3 days a week of DL is falling short for so many children. If you could help us with this situation, we would greatly appreciate it. There are so many of us who need in-person learning, but most of the students in Warwick deserve what all other districts are offering. Thank you for your time, and I hope to hear from you soon. Sincerely, Jen Goff. Thank you, Jen. The next is from Sarah Neal. Good evening, school committee members. I submit the following email for public comment concerning the reopening of Warwick Public Schools, or perhaps more accurately put, the significant delay in reopening Warwick Public Schools. And you should know up front that to this point, I have given the school committee and superintendent every benefit of the doubt. Yes, you didn't receive prompt guidance from RIDE on your reopening plan. And sure, I was amongst the parents who was a bit hesitant to send my children back even in a hybrid model. Well, consider that gone, because the actions being taken since the summer by this school committee shows how over your heads you are, and how much our kids, since that initial vote to start the year with distance learning, it has been misstep after misstep. And this latest bungling of trying to bring kindergarten students back is the last straw for me. If you had any idea how much these students are struggling, particularly kindergarten students, you would have taken more care to get your acts together sooner. And now I am left with one of those kindergarten students who used to love school. In a classroom-like setting at his former daycare, is acting out in response to having to learn through a computer every day. I am tired of hearing your excuses as to why the students aren't back in school. Frankly, it's absurd us parents even have to tell you that on October 1, which is almost 3 weeks after school started. Time's up. Bring our students back to school now. Sincerely, Sarah Neal. Thank you, Sarah, for your letter. The Next comment is from Mr. Henry Whitford. Good afternoon, my friends. I really need each and every one of you to email and/or call the school committee members, Dr. Thornton, Mr. Ferrucci, Lynn D'Ambrose, and your principal. We need to let them know that we are not playing games when it comes to our children's education. Please take the time. This is important. Thank you, Henry Whitford. Thank you, Henry. It's always good to hear from you. The next comment is from Katie Mulligan. Dear school committee and administration, this week my second grader started at a private school. On her first day, she came home with spelling words, homework, and a spelling test planned for Thursday. But most importantly, her first school-related smile since March. She was finally happy about learning again. I was able to go to work. She went to school. We met up at the end of the day. Both of us were happy and healthy. It was wonderful. Her school is following guidance from RIDOH, and they're opening windows and using fans. They have many outdoor classes, use diligent screening procedures, and students, staff, and teachers are happy and healthy. Somehow, even with an old building and 20 kids in the classroom, they found room in the state guidance to make it work. They have chosen to make educating children their priority, and they weave the safety measures into their environment. However, I still have a daughter who is in 4th grade in a Warwick public school. She is a diligent student. She gets her work done and is self-motivated. Still, that doesn't mean that she doesn't struggle. I spent time with her this evening, fighting with the platform on which she was meant to be doing her work. The cursor wasn't working correctly. The words were being typed past the lines given. She tried making separate text boxes for every single sentence in her paragraph. She became so incredibly frustrated with just the technology that she completely missed the lesson in the assignment and went to bed frustrated and in tears because it is just not working. This is a bright, eager to learn student, and even she is frustrated. Doesn't understand the assignments, becomes angry with the platforms, and is ultimately disengaged from learning. Combine this with the fact that my child's cousins and friends in other towns are back in school full time. Try explaining fairness to a 4th grader who sees all of her out-of-town buddies in school while she is not. Did she do something wrong? Is it her fault? Maybe if she tried harder in distance learning, they'd let her go back to school. Unless you see it firsthand, you can't quite understand how deeply painful it is for us to watch our beautiful, happy, smart children become angry, frustrated, tearful, anxious, and disconnected due to distance learning. If you could for a minute imagine one of the worst, most frustrating things you ever had to do, something that really just made you want to bang your head against the wall, now multiply that by 5 and put stress into the brain of a child. That is what our kids are facing every single day that you keep them in distance learning. It is far too much for these young brains and bodies to take. The toll that distance learning is taking on children, the COVID slide, those are bigger issues and they need to be addressed immediately. We are crying, we are begging, we are shouting from the rooftops. Put our children in school. Tonight, I am asking you to require from the administration a plan for full in-person return to school to be fully implemented and executed by the state's deadline of October 13th. A hybrid model will only make our children and teachers less safe. Warwick students are counting on you. Warwick taxpayers who want to see their schools and communities thrive are counting on you. Warwick children have suffered long enough. Other districts are in, Put our kids in school. Sincerely, Katie Mulligan. Thank you, Katie. The next public comment is from Angela Oliveira. Why, when Warwick is so far behind most of the state's public school openings, are we only planning to go back to school 2 days a week? What, are we not going to full in-person learning? At least 4 days a week with Mondays as DL? Sent from my iPhone. Thank you. The next email is from Sarah Neal. Good evening, school committee members. I submit the following email for public comment concerning the reopening of Warwick Public Schools, or perhaps more accurately put, the significant delay in reopening Warwick Public Schools. And you should know up front, to this point, I have given this school committee and superintendent every benefit of the doubt. Yes, you didn't receive prompt guidance from RIDE on your reopening plan. And sure.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I think this one's been read already. I know I have it in my notes.
Sorry, somehow I have it twice.
Okay,
I have it twice.
okay.
Sorry, thank you. Twice. I have a bunch of repeats. Here we go. This is from Jen McCullough. Good evening. I am emailing this so I can be another parent that is having their voice heard on the importance of their child receiving in-person schooling. My son is a first grader. His teacher has been doing a fantastic job with distance learning. However, there are things that distance learning cannot provide, no matter how great the teacher is. My son is a hands-on learner. Last year, when he was in kindergarten, he was having a great year learning by his teachers. He would go to and come home from school excited. Then COVID happened and took this experience away from him. I keep hearing how the kindergartners are receiving in-person schooling, how it's so crucial as they are vulnerable. But I feel that first graders are just as crucial. These kids started reading and learning math. I have done my best by continuing to try to keep up with the reading and math, but my son, like most, accomplishes much more when his mama isn't teaching him. My son starts his school day with a Google Meet with his class. He does well for the first half, but by the second half, he is asking how much longer and when he can have a break. Throughout the day, he will either have to go back on Google Meet for an assignment, or he will have an independent assignment. This leads to an antsy child that I have to sit next to help him follow along and make sure that he is participating in the assignment, or while continuously asking him to either pay attention or sit down. By afternoon time, he is completely done and shuts down. It becomes a battle, and frustration starts to show its face by this point, I cannot blame him. It's a lot to ask of a 6-year-old to sit in front of a computer all day. It's too much screen time. My son used to love going to school and would immediately tell me about his school day when I picked him up. Now I only hear about wanting breaks, not wanting to do the assignment, and not wanting to do school. Almost every day he asks when he can go back to school. I do my best to explain why he can't, but he doesn't understand this because his response is, how come his friends get to go back who live in other districts? I do not have an answer to that because I don't understand nor agree with them not returning. I am pleading with you to get the first graders back at the same time the kindergartners go back. I do not want his education suffering. I have always told him that he can be anything he wants to be. I just hope he will receive the best education, which is in person, so he will have the opportunity to fulfill his dream. Thank you, Jen McCullough. And thank you, Jen. The next letter is from Jacqueline Petraka. And she says, "Dear school committee members, I am writing to inform you of the inequalities being experienced across the city with distance learning, from school to school and classroom to classroom. I have 3 elementary-aged children, and they are all receiving very different formats of distance learning, some effective and others not. A standard of acceptable practices needs to be implemented and enforced citywide so that there are fewer inequities across the city. I fully supported distance learning until I saw the vast educational losses in my children. One of my daughters has just tested at 2 grade levels behind where she should be reading, when she was always at grade level prior to the spring. She is suffering. Maybe a full reopening of schools is not the answer, but distance learning, as we are experiencing it in certain classrooms, is not working. There is a lack of direct instruction or any instruction at all. Children that cannot read cannot distance learn successfully. My daughter is currently trying to learn vowel patterns from a 3-minute YouTube video. This is unacceptable. While you are working to implement the reopening plan, there needs to be a plan to address parent concerns if their child is not receiving any live instruction. At a minimum, all elementary students in grades 1 through 5 should be having a morning meeting, live or recorded, 30 minutes of live ELA instruction, and 30 minutes of live math instruction. Reports of this not occurring should be addressed and rectified within days, not weeks. I am honestly baffled that this was not the standard from the beginning. And if it is the standard, there are several schools and teachers that are not adhering to the requirements. My intent is not to lay blame or point fingers. This is simply a matter of fact view from a parent that is exhausted from the runaround trying to advocate for her child. Distance learning is not adequately meeting the needs of many of our children, which means they are not receiving a free, appropriate education at this time from the Warwick School Department. Thank you for your time and consideration, Jackie Yates. Thank you, Jackie. Next comment is from Danny Young. I have to say to think distance learning is not working. Yes, teachers are better equipped this year. It is not enough. I have 3 kids at home, one in the 9th grade, one in 4th grade, and one in 2nd grade. My daughter has IEP. It's been a struggle to say the least. While you wait for air filters, I could tell you 10 different ways to filter the air. I don't know who comes up with ordering, but to wait week after school starts is a slap in the face to the kids. You guys don't want to hear alternatives to the solution until your air purifiers come in. You just want to sit on your computers and bicker about moving stuff back and forth. My daughter with IEP is having the hardest time, and it kills me because she feels her 100% is not enough. Kids need to be on school. Why you spend millions? I need air purifiers. For the time being, you could look into easy breeze systems of small air purifiers. Decking make a single room's air purifier that make huge differences. If the air was very bad all these years, why did you guys play our children into the school as it was? Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Hennius, it appears that I got some duplicates, but that I did not get all the emails, and I'm not sure. I know there were a couple others that were sent to me, CC'd to me along with, and this is the last one. I'm not sure where they went, and I'm not sure how to rectify that.
All I did was cut and paste whatever was sent, whatever I received through the call-in website. I did it, and some of them may have been duplicate because I don't read them. I just attached them all and sent them off to you.
I'm going to read this last one. We have a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and I will track down the rest of them and read them at that time. Do you think that's okay, Mr. Hennius?
There are a number of them that have come in after 12 o'clock that I've already forwarded to you for tomorrow morning.
Okay, so is it okay if I track the others that came in before 12?
If you, yeah, I mean, if they exist, I sent you whatever came in that I was aware that I received.
I understand. I just know I got a couple that I was CC'd on.
So yeah, those may not have been submitted through the formal process. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Okay.
We'll work it out. If your letter isn't read tonight, we're going to try and read it tomorrow morning. We'll try and track them down and read it tomorrow morning. This is from our last letter. Is from Jennifer Payne. Dear Warwick School Committee members, I am writing to you today with 5 minutes I have before my next class meeting. I am an educator and a parent here in the city of Warwick. I am on both sides of this distance learning. Let me explain to you how difficult and unjust this situation is. I have had 21 first graders show up for 2 to 3 Google Meets a day for 13 days now. That attendance alone is an amazing achievement in itself. First graders, 6 and 7-year-olds, generally love school. They love to come in and say good morning, to greet their friends and teachers, to play at recess, to tell me stories, to have a snack break and lunch together, and to learn from a teacher. We are able to do some of these things on Google Meet. Many we are not. Every day I look into the eyes of one specific student who I worked with at the end of last year. I see his sadness. I see his struggles. He is smart. He understands school. I want more for him, more for his classmates and the children of Warwick. I am worried about these children and the quality of education they are receiving. It took 21 first graders 40 minutes to learn how to open a new tab in Google Chrome. 40 minutes with 4 students crying because they could not get it. My heart breaks. This is not their fault. They are babies. They are little children who should not have to worry about a strict schedule and how to add a new tab in their browser. The poor students in daycare learning centers are struggling. It's loud for them. They don't have a grown-up nearby to help them. They cry and get upset. My heart breaks for them. I understand that we are in the middle of a pandemic. I understand that you want to keep students safe. But let's be honest. The conditions of our school buildings have been declining for years, and all we do is put Band-Aid fixes on things and act like it's all good. Is it? Is this the best we can do for these children? Warwick Public Schools are their foundation, their building blocks for their education, and we are failing them. Cranston is in the same situation as we are financially, and the quality of their buildings is as poor as ours. But guess what? They are back in school. They made it work. They are held accountable. So why can't we open windows and doors and take learning outside on a playground or a field? We have wasted almost 2 months of nice weather, 2 months of getting to know the children, 2 months of children with lost instruction, 2 months of tears. Socially and emotionally, I am worried. People are struggling to keep up with schedules, work, finances, teaching their own children, making nutritious meals, running errands, and simply not being able to enjoy life with the overwhelming work it is to keep students distance learning. My own 2 daughters' educations have suffered. They cry at the thought of doing more computer work. We read or listen to books at the dinner table to get more work in. At bedtime, we go over vocabulary words they should be understanding. They hate this. They cry. One said, "Coronavirus ruined her life." Yes, a little dramatic, but again, my heart breaks. They miss their friends. They do not like this situation at all. Their mom is on a computer all day with her students, trying to help them in the best way possible. The students do not want another app bought for them to sit in front of the computer to use. Distance learning has taken the fun out of these fun learning apps. The inconsistency throughout the district is irresponsible. Why are some schools not being held to the same standards as others? Do better, please. We need to do better. This is not okay. We are not okay. Your faculty and staff are amazing, and they are working so hard right now to make this work. It is not working. Please get these children back to school. Thank you for listening. Jennifer Payne. And CC from the CDC website: increase ventilation and airflow, ensure ventilation systems when present are working properly, increase circulation of outdoor air within buildings by opening windows and doors if it is safe to do so. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And anything further, we will put together and read in the morning. And now we will go back to the meeting, to the agenda. Item G, new business. 1, discussion action, reopening of Warwick schools. Mr. Testa.
Is it me? Am I presenting? I think Dr. Thornton's going to present.
I can start.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
you can start. I have a lot. I have a lot to say, but you can
No,
start.
you looked at, I thought you looked at me like you wanted to say something.
So just to update,
Dr. Thornton.
the committee of what's been happening since last time we talked. At the state level, we're talking to the state often about different ways to get us back. And we talked to the state last week about something that didn't revolve around a box fan. So we actually spoke to the engineers, Ardent Engineering, which are secured by the state to be the consultant for Rhode Island for HVAC. And Ardent Engineering sent out one of their experts, Tim Elliott, Monday, at which time he toured a few of our buildings. And from that, you have a document in your packet, if you will, that we can go over it. And Mr. Gothberg will take you through it and will answer your questions. Essentially, just to kind of frame it for you, I think it fundamentally changes some things that we've been struggling with. First, as you'll see in the packet, I think alleviates the fire code concerns, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And second, it does give you some remedies to get airflow. I'll tell you, just to preface before Steve begins, there is no perfect solution, but I think this goes a long way to getting us what I'll call a bridge between now and the purifiers coming in around Halloween for elementary. So I'd like to have Steve kind of take you through what developed and then go through with questions that you may have on this report. So, Steve?
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members.
Evening.
On Monday, we walked both Oakland Beach and Park School, which are Oakland Beach being one of our oldest schools and Park Elementary being one of our newer elementaries. And we walked and discussed airflow, how we could make it happen. And along with that, there was a discussion of keeping doors open and fire code. So when we talked about airflow in the buildings, we had the major discussion was on opening windows, how many windows, how far they would need to be open, and what we would need to do as far as opening doors. So the first discussion was exterior doors being open. So the first thing we did when we came in was open exterior doors. One of the big concerns with that, obviously, is security. So we did it. We opened windows, we opened classroom doors, we opened exterior doors. Airflow was good. And then we went back and shut the exterior doors and opened windows across classroom. And that seemed to work pretty well. Once again, there's many variables, excuse me, when we do this. If there's no wind, then there's no air movement. If it's really windy, then there's an extreme amount of air movement. So, your teachers would have to adjust windows accordingly. And then the decision would have to be made on exterior doors, whether you would want them open or not for security reasons. And I think one of the bigger issues in the older schools, we have 3 schools with basements. One of the problems there would be how would we get the air moving in those areas. Air does not tend to move in a closed space. And in a couple of the schools, there is no cross ventilations because windows are only being able to be opened on one side. So that would be a consideration.
Steve, can you speak to the fire code and how they relate to the interior classroom doors?
We did receive letters from both the state fire marshal and the local fire marshal Kapaka. And they both agreed that interior classroom doors to the hallway can be propped open as long as there are teachers in the classroom. And if the teachers leave, the class leaves through a fire alarm, going to lunch, whatever, going outside, that the doors be closed immediately. That is the only, that is the only caveat with that. So teachers, staff would have to be trained to shut doors upon exiting the classroom. So I'm open for any questions.
Discussion,
Madam Chair?
Mr. Testa?
Thank you. Actually, I had my questions all framed until public comment, and Mr. Hennius, don't panic. There were two public comments for me that were bookends to this whole thing. One was from Ms. Petracca, who spoke about the inequalities with distance learning and the standards. And that's a big concern, because I know, Ms. Danbrook, I know how much effort went into developing distance learning and the whole protocol and what we're going to do this year versus last year. And to be perfectly honest, I can't accept that we have, if Ms. Petracca's statement is true, I can't accept the fact that we'd have that much of a variety of standards. If that's the case, I would advise every parent, if you don't feel that your student, your child is being taught in a way that you find acceptable, you need to reach out to the teacher and to the principal, and then go right up the chain into the administration if you have to. There is no excuse to have a variety of standards on DL. And then I bookend it with Ms. Payne, who essentially pointed to the trials and tribulations of what DL is for an elementary student. So to me, they're bookends of a problem. And it's never a bad thing to admit that something isn't working. The only way you improve it is if you recognize the fact that maybe something's not working and we improve. So that said, I want to get to the document you sent us on art and engineering. I would point out to you in that document, Mr. Gothberg, they also provided us this nice little chart on average wind speed in Rhode Island on various months of the year and how it fluctuates. But there are a couple of things here, and I have no problem with what they proposed, okay? If you want to open windows in rooms that are on opposite side of the corridor and open the doors to create a cross breeze, that's fine, and that would appear to work, okay? 3 weeks ago, we were just hearing open a window 6 inches and you're fine. And I would just, for public record, state that I know you people have been reaching out to the state and the various people, whether it's RIDE, Department of Health, all these other people that are supposed to be setting the guidelines. And I know that we request things in writing. And I know it's difficult to get things in writing, okay? And I have to tell you, as a school committee member and a parent, I like things in writing. Because writing, if I can go back, if I have something in writing, I can go back and I can say, here's where you said we could do this. So having said that, a couple of the points of the art and engineering thing, where he says wind velocity is variable and changes speed. That's not controllable, of course, once the windows are open. Wind direction affects the flow of air through the building. This is not controllable, of course. So the point is, there are some days you're gonna be just fine. Other days it's gonna be kind of marginal. The opening of exterior doors, if anybody wants to open up exterior doors, I think they're nuts. The only time we should open exterior doors is when people are leaving the building. During the school day, opening exterior doors so that anybody can walk in the building ain't happening. Just not happening. I don't even know how anybody could, in their right mind, recommend that. And then there's another point where it says there could be times when the wind velocity is too low. At this time, the state requirements will not be met. So, and then also, by the way, there's some emails attached to the back that are correspondence, what looks like our inquiry to either Arden or the state, and then they're back and forth, and with their final word about whether you can open exterior doors, that was dated September 29th. So I just want to say, I understand what Arden is proposing, and I agree with Dr. Thornton. I think it's something that's doable. In the elementary schools. When you get to the secondary schools, I'm not sure how doable that could be. We still have the issue with the secondary levels with classrooms without windows. So having said all that, I want this district to set as a goal. The goal should be aspirational here. Our goal should be full return in person, every student, every day, 5 days a week. That is the goal we should set for ourselves. Knowing that we may not be able to achieve it, but we need to set that goal for ourselves. And it's going to be hard, and we're going to have to do some soul searching here. But we have to realize fully that those interior classrooms, if we don't get a resolution on whether or not we can use those rooms, okay, before we get purifiers or even after we get purifiers, and that's something I'd want in writing. Okay, if we can't use those rooms, then that's going to be an obstacle that has to be overcome, because I don't know how much extra space we have in the secondary schools, particularly Tollgate and Windman. In the elementary schools, we've been really pushing the 6-foot distance. That was the state's original guidance. And then in the state's guidance, they would equivocate it. They would say when possible, whatnot. American Academy of Pediatrics said 3 to 6 feet. We're hearing from a lot of parents now who want their kids in school. And if the only way we can get their kids back in school is we go from a 3 to 6 foot distance, and it could vary, then as long as we're up front with everybody to say, when the kids are in school, our students are in school, the distance could be anywhere from 3 to 6 feet. And then it'll be up to them to make the choice if they want to send their students or not. But the purifiers will really fix the problem. But until then, I think we're going to have to phase this in, right? And I'm not against necessarily doing a hybrid first and then seeing how that goes, and then going to more of an in-person, provided, of course, we can fit all these kids. And if we have to do elementary first, we'll do elementary first, and then we do secondary. But I think other districts are doing it, and I still have questions about how those other districts are doing it. I know some are using tents. I'm not a fan of tents, and I've been public about that, and I will never be a fan of tents. Some people are using windows and box fans, and I'll sit here and I'll say I think some of those districts are bending, if not breaking, fire code rules. That's their choice. That's not me. I would never support that. Many districts are using 3 to 6 foot distance, and the state's guidelines now are saying, 6 foot where possible. Okay, so if it's not possible and you can do anywhere from 3 to 6, then migrate to 3 if we have to. But again, I'll round it out by saying the overall goal should be all kids in school 5 days a week. Okay, and if we can't get to that, then it would be all kids in school 4 days a week, and then we go back that way. So now's the time we're going to have to ratchet it up for ourselves. My colleagues may or may not feel the same way, of course, but that's for us to decide. It's a lot of work on your administration to figure that out with rooms that can or cannot be used. Basements, we have a school like Wyman that has a basement. Not sure if we can use those basement classrooms yet, which has to be determined. So I think now we should do that, because I don't know how much more guidance is necessary from the state. The Arden piece kind of lays out how you're going to do air circulation in an acceptable manner. We've heard from the fire marshals now. So, and I'm not implying in any way, shape, or form that anything that's been done to date has been too late, too little, or anything like that. I don't subscribe to that. I think this committee has rightfully been cautious because that was the right thing to do. I don't think we were looking to ingratiate ourselves with any people at the state level just to get pats on the back. I don't think that's what we're in this for either. I think we're in this to make sure that once we put our kids in the building, we're putting them into the best possible scenario that we can create within the restrictions that are placed on us as a district with our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Very well said. I agree with everything that you just said. Anyone else?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Cornell.
So Mr. Gothberg, so you said you walked through those 2 schools. So I know that not all the classrooms have working windows. So do you have an estimation of like the percentage of classrooms that have open windows, so therefore could possibly be utilized?
Well, as far to my knowledge, most of the schools have a minimum of 1 window being being able to be open, and most have more than that. So there's a couple schools that have issues. I'll have to go around and check each one. But I would say all classrooms have windows that can be open. The exact number I cannot tell you off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. And also, I think going back on what Mr. Testa said, so if we're like, yeah, we would have to phase this in, but yeah, another idea is maybe perhaps with like elementary will be first, but maybe we could do first or second grade first and phase it in that way if this is deemed safe. And I wish we got this report before, but of course, like everything, you could say that about anything. Like this is all, people are finding new information all the time, but yeah. But that's one thing maybe we could look into, like kindergarten, maybe first and second next. And then there will be a lot more space in the schools. But I definitely would want to make sure those classrooms, like they have good airflow. Like I don't want to have like children in a windowless classroom. Like we just can't have that. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Dr. Thornton?
in terms of phasing, Mr. Cornell, if the committee was supportive of this discussion, and it's also on tomorrow, as you know, we would plan to have a meeting, we can take action on this very early next week. At that point, we propose to you a phasing plan at that point in time.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Madam Chair?
Anyone else?
Madam Chair?
Good evening, Mr. Jones.
So, I mean, Mr. Testa really hit the nail on the head. We've been very cautious with all of our decisions, obviously, for reasons he stated. I do have a couple of concerns, I guess, that I can form into questions in terms of Arden's recommendation. Now, Oakland Beach and Park, I'm not exactly familiar with their layout or anything of the sort, but do either of them have courtyards?
They have playgrounds.
Oakland Beach has a courtyard. I don't know.
Well, I only ask because like I know Pilgrim has courtyards. Were classrooms like that, where the windows were into the courtyards that were in between buildings, were they measured? Because I doubt there's going to be as much wind there as one that's going to be one that's just facing open air.
And also to your point, Mr. Adams, so far this has been an elementary conversation. As I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you heard, my thinking on this was this is a bridge to the air filters, which are coming in around October 23rd, thereabouts, right? We still have the second wave of filters coming in for the secondaries later than that at this point in time. So if you were to subscribe to this for the middle highs, the only challenge I see is you'd be, okay in October, a little chilly, but then you're in November, December with only a open window protocol. And if human nature is what I think it is, people will close the windows and then you have a problem. So I think need some more discussion on middle high, how you mitigate or get to, that point that the filters come in. I think all schools around Rhode Island are having that problem. In terms of Pilgrim, you're right. You go into classrooms, there's some high windows in the classrooms, and some of them don't have a corresponding room across the way. They have a courtyard, so where's the cross ventilation in that conversation, right?
Right.
But
Well, I only bring up Pilgrim because I mean that's the school I went to. That's the only example I have for a classroom with a courtyard.
right. So I think really we're still, looking hard to, somehow get the air filters quicker for the secondaries. Right now, we're still December 4th. That's our reality. But for elementary, we really, in most cases, we think, as read Arden, on most days, you would get the prescribed 4 changes of air. It says Arden's not going to promise it, right? They're going to say wind
Right.
change. But on most days, this would work in most classrooms. That's
Right. And now I understand that, and the most is where I get very wary. Now I guess I'll address this question to Mr. Gothberg. Now this is 2 elementary schools. Is it safe to apply the same data that's presented here? Is it safe to apply that to all the other schools around Warwick? I mean, obviously, Oakland Beach is closer to the beach. Oakland Beach Elementary is closer to the beach, so it's going to be a little bit windier. Are there other classrooms? Not classrooms. A lot of. Are there other schools that might not be getting as much wind as Park or Oakland because of surrounding factors?
This is a very variable situation. The wind is variable, locations are variable, elevations are variable. So it will not be exactly the same at any school, and orientation of the building is different. So, wind comes from usually north or south. Sometimes you get east or west, but mostly this time of year, north, I would think, south. But I think that at some point, windows do face the wind direction. And if windows, classroom doors, and then opposite windows are open, I think you will get ventilation. I can't say how that would not happen unless you get a very, very still day. You will get some ventilation, but it will be variable. It will not be exactly the same in all classroom. It will not be exactly the same in all school. For me to say that it's safe or not safe, I have to rely on what the experts are saying. And that's art and engineering. As I rely on the fire marshal to tell me what I can and cannot do with the doors. So does that answer your question?
It does. Just hoping for a different answer.
Oh, it's a variable situation.
Yeah, I know. But
It's not going to be exactly the same at any place.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Madam Chair, I two things I
Yes.
forgot. Thank you. Dr. Thornton, two things, one directly related to what we're talking about. We are going to have some free space at Warwick Veterans, right? We have it now, and then once we get elementaries up, we will have more space, right? As those elementary special ed programs transition back, right?
Actually, Ms. Danbury and Mr. McCaffrey has been detailed to give you that exact conversation tonight.
Okay, cool.
I'm
Let me just finish my thought. Okay, I'm sorry.
Please, Mr. Testa, go on.
Thank you. So that was leading to my question. We need to come up with a plan for that space to see what possibilities or what options are available to us. So I guess I'll at this point, let me just finish my last thought, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. McCaffrey and Ms. Danbury.
Go ahead. Take your time.
The last thing, once we get this squared away and we have our kids in our buildings in whatever way, shape, or form they're in, the next real big lift that you folks are gonna have to deal with is, and Dr. Thornton, you've mentioned this before, there will be a COVID gap. And I am keenly interested in what we develop to fix that, because there's definitely gonna be one. We're not gonna be the only district that has it, but I can understand a parent whose elementary school age child struggles in front of a screen, because it's not the same as interacting with the happy teacher in front of you. And to hear stories where, a 7-year-old gives up, that doesn't rest well with me. So the plan that we have to, I'll leave it at that.
Right, just a quick response if I could. So to kind of talk about what that might look like. In our country, we have many, many, many standards for kids, too many standards, right? But in every grade, you probably have 8 or 10 standards that really matter the most. And those are the things you would focus on with principals and teachers to say, in grade 4 math, what are the power standards for, this year? What is it? Is it fractions? Is it decimals? What is it? And then you do pulse checks or assessments on those standards to make sure kids, at a minimum, leave in June with those big ideas nailed down. That means you don't cover everything, and that's okay. Covering has been kind of like the curse of education in our country. You cover everything, right? But if you really focus on the things that matter most, that sets up kids for the next thing, and that's really the conversation. Talking to Ms. Amala yesterday, her team's already working on benchmark assessments, kind of like pacing guides, so we know at certain points in the year, here's where we think we should be. Let's stop and do a pulse check. How are we doing on that big idea? And that's kind of the conversation. Teachers and principals, pick or discuss what those big ideas are, then you measure them. So that's the work of this year as far as the gap goes, making sure we identify those and hit those things.
Superintendent, are those ideas formulated and given to our teachers?
I think a lot of them reside on the report card, but now on the report card, there are still many things on there. You might have, say, I don't know, many ELA standards, but there may be only, 4 or 5 that really teachers would say, these are the most important on the report card. And that's what we drill down on. So report card is probably the big frame. You drill down from the report card to really hone in on what matters most.
As for myself, and I can't speak for other committee members, but I imagine they may want this as well. We need a list of those priorities, standards for each grade, and they need to be provided to the teachers so that the teachers know where to focus. And maybe even for the parents to see what the big issues in that grade are.
With your permission, I could bring Ms. Amelot and team to the October 13th meeting to have that conversation.
If you, certainly,
Okay.
but also please the paperwork as well.
Mm-hmm. I know Ms. Danberg and Ms. McCaffrey are going to delve into grade 6 for Mr. Testa and the committee. That's okay?
Excellent.
Madam Chair, before we talk about vets, I just wanted to add to Mr. Testa's question. We also have the math interventionist and the reading specialist. As Dr. Thornton said, we're given a diagnostic test right now to see where our children are. We always meet the children where they are, and we give them extra support when needed, whether it's a classroom teacher giving tier 2 interventions, or whether it's a special educator giving tier 3 interventions, or whether it's the reading and math interventionist. So we understand there's a gap here that we need to work hard to fill. So we'll be using all of our resources. Our Title I schools also have extra reading specialists and math interventionists to give extra help as well. So we will be tapping into all of those resources.
Madam Chair, members of the school committee.
Good evening, Mr. McCaffrey. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much. In looking at the 6th grade, we're looking at Warwick veterans, and we have 369 students in the 6th grade. Looking at space, we have approximately 22 rooms between D wing down and the 900 wing. That's on the back side of the school, close to the fire station. If you're pulling into the back of Warwick veterans, we could accommodate 369 students in a hybrid model in that area of the school, and we wouldn't have any difficulty with providing an education to the students based upon the current schedule, as long as we're in a hybrid situation.
Madam Chair, if I could, I know that
Superintendent, please.
that certainly begs the question of equity for women, which, we have discussed at length. For the committee to discuss, if you have one building that meets the standards ready to go, but one that does not, we still have questions in it, right, by the way, for 2 weeks on women on interior classrooms. We're waiting for answers on that. But if we have one that meets and one that doesn't meet, that's a conversation with the committee as far as equity goes, right? Do you go forward with what you have that's ready to go, or do you, think of something else? But that's certainly a conversation. The other piece to consider as part of this conversation is, if we adopt this AIR report, if you phase back in elementary, right, next couple of weeks, if you then phase back in the self-contained classrooms at Veterans Lab in elementary, all those classrooms back to where they live, you now have more space at Veterans. So that once again, begs the question, what do you do with that space, right? So that's something we'll be bringing to you in more detail, probably on the October 13th meeting.
Madam
Soon as
Chair?
possible, please. Assistant Superintendent Danbro?
Yes, I agree with Mr. McCaffrey that those classrooms are just sitting there empty, waiting for students and teachers to occupy them. I think it would be a shame not to bring those students back and fill those classrooms up. I feel that it's very safe. You know, you've toured the building with me. You know, they're in a separate location, the 900 wing and the D wing. They're separated from the other programs that are in there. And I do think it's important. You know, 6th grade is a transitional grade. You're going from elementary school model to a middle school model, which it's very important to get as many 6th graders back as soon as possible.
Ms. Danbrook, I am in complete agreement with you. And I think as space becomes available and as we're able to get other classrooms up and running via whatever means, that we should be bringing, personally, I think we should be bringing our students back as much as possible. Because this is not working well.
Madam Chair,
Superintendent?
with your permission, if we do have a meeting next week to, actually have you vote on this air concept, we could also expedite the grade 6 conversation for that meeting as well.
I think that would be very excellent, and I would ask you to do that. We will have a meeting next week, and please expedite that and put it on the agenda. Mr. Testa?
Thank you. Ms. Danbrook, thank you. Mr. McCaffrey, thank you. I agree with you, Madam Chair. If we have space, let's fill it. Space in vets is good space. There's no legitimate difference of opinion as to whether that space could be safe, like we could have, say, at Windman in a windowless classroom. And I know there are equity issues, I get it, but again, I've said before, the perfect can't be the enemy of the good. If there's a space, let's fill it. And now's the time we put our foot on the gas and just keep it on the gas. And it's a lot of work for you folks, but I'm confident that we can get it done. And I think once we start to make the progress, things will fall into place pretty quickly. So thank you.
Madam Chair?
Certainly, Ms. Danbrook.
I also wanted to comment on how smoothly the opening of the special education programs at Veterans went. I mean, there was a lot of planning that took place. I appreciate the hard work from Roy Costa, Adam Haywood, and all the teachers and teacher assistants. Dr. Thornton and I visited the program on Tuesday, and it was wonderful to see the smiling faces on the children. The teachers were so happy to be back in person with their students. The busing went well, the drop-off and pickup went well. The lunch and breakfast deliveries, everything went smoothly. The masks, the children are wearing the masks for the most part, and they have mask breaks. They're taking advantage of the outside space, for classroom instruction, for mask breaks, and for recess. So it was a very successful opening. So I feel confident that 6th grade would be as successful with careful planning.
Agreed. And I heard that it's quite remarkable, the kids coming back and how happy they are. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to try and get over there tomorrow. Anyone else?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Cornell?
Yeah, so Ms. Danbrook, I'm glad that everything went well with the special ed students going back. And also, I'm glad, Mr. McCaffrey, that you're looking into 6th grade returning. One thing I would like to see is like all IEP students being able to go back, because I've been getting a lot of emails and they're having a lot of problems with distance learning. And I think that should also be a priority. So are you looking into that currently?
Go ahead, Dr. Thornton.
Superintendent?
So I can start. I know certainly if you were to go forward with this AIR report, you would be getting the IEP students back for elementary, right? Grade 6. I know there's also been conversation in the past, or I'll call it a temptation to change the students, IEP and put them in a more restrictive location. We simply can't do that. I think legal counsel can help us kind of explain that. But if someone has an IEP with a certain placement, we can't then self-contain them in a different location without a change of the IEP. But to the extent we can, we absolutely want to bring everyone back, and that K-5 elementary is the first wave of that.
Thank you,
I
Superintendent.
understand. Thank
Amber?
Yes, so, Ms. Cornell, I do agree that I've been hearing from parents too, who have students in the resource program and also the co-taught programs. So as we bring a phase-in elementary school back to in-person in the hybrid model, those students will be included in that. So that would solve that problem.
Thank you, Ms. Danbrook.
Madam Chair.
Superintendent?
Also, to Mr. Testa's earlier point of the end goal in mind being 5 days all in person, we'd certainly be modeling, that for you and how that could look if you were to phase it out. So try to give you a sense of that in short order.
Thank you, Superintendent. We'd appreciate that. Anyone else? I think we have to do whatever we can to not only bring our students back and to expedite that, but I think there are an awful lot of complaints and concerns from parents about the school day, about how teachers are handling things, about actual time in the classroom, time in office hours, things like that. And I think that we need to get hold of that and determine what's going on and make sure that we are doing the same thing across the district. And if people need PD, if teachers or others need PD, then we need to build it and make it happen for them. And because we need to be consistent, and that's really a huge issue. And I know I've gotten quite a number of concerns and complaints about that, some which I've brought to you. Anything further? If not, we'll move to the next matter. Under new business, G, number 2, discussion action, school committee policy, BCC, potential amendment. Superintendent?
No, Madam Chair, I know we have a current policy on the books speaking to the school committee secretary, and I know there's been some discussion over possibly amending policy to clean it up. So certainly happy to have the conversation now if members have questions.
Thank you, sir. Discussion.
Madam Chair,
Augusta?
if I may, thank you. We're going to take this up tomorrow. Can we take this up tomorrow? Do we have to do this tonight? I don't think we have to do this tonight.
We have to discuss it this evening in order to vote on it tomorrow.
Okay. Is that true, Mr. Hennius? Is that what we're doing? Or no?
What your policy for an amendment, your policy for an amendment to a policy just requires that any potential amendment be discussed at a prior meeting. I know we did have some discussions in executive session relative to legal aspects and legal questions related to the policy. It probably wouldn't hurt to have a short discussion out here, just to sort of discuss what was discussed and what amendments the committee is considering.
Oh, okay.
Counselor, would you feel comfortable giving a brief overview of what was discussed so that it remains legal? And we don't go
Sure, I'm
outside
happy to.
any boundaries?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the current policy, if you just hang on 1 second, I'll pull it up so I quote it properly. The current policy requires the superintendent to recommend a school committee secretary who is not a full or part-time employee currently serving with the Warwick Public Schools. There's been a question as to whether that requirement or prohibition is appropriate or not. And in order to amend the policy, like I said, there needs to be a discussion as to whether to strike that language or change the policy. That's the discussion that's taking place tonight, and the legal impact of that. There's also on the next agenda item, the option of the committee to leave the policy as is and to post the position moving from the interim. So that's the two.
It's frozen. Hopefully he'll be back soon.
I think he's saying, Madam Chair, those are the two options you have tonight.
I was just hoping he'd come back soon, but he'll be back soon. Here he is. Andrew?
How much of that did you lose?
Chris, you had two options. You had two, then it ended.
Option. So you got option one. I'm sorry. Okay. Option two, which is agenda item 3, I believe, would be to leave the policy as is and to post the position.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Mr. Testa, please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, with respect to amending the policy, I would support that. This policy is 40 years old, 39 years old to be exact. And things change. I don't think the way it's worded now is realistic. So I would support a change in the policy.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Cornell?
I'm very much opposed to changing this policy. This policy was put there for a reason to prevent conflicts of interest, and I do not believe that the school committee secretary and the superintendent secretary should be one person. I think it should be separate, and this has nothing to do with the previous secretary, that individual, or even with the superintendent. I believe that I don't think we should have a conflict of interest, because if we change it, that means this will be the precedent for years on. So we might have a secretary and a superintendent in the far future that it could be a problem. And I just don't, how do we explain to the public changing a policy to prevent a conflict of interest, to change it for one person so they can have these two positions, which could be a conflict of interest. So I'm just very much opposed to changing this policy, and I think we should post, but I'll talk about that when we get to it.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Question, how is this a conflict of interest? We have put protections in, and this has been the case for quite some time. Our previous secretary took minutes only. We will have to hire a full-time or significantly part-time person who, if they're over 20 hours, get benefits and everything else. And we're talking about a confidential secretary. So who's a professional is what we'd be hiring. So they don't come cheap. And so I don't understand where the conflict of interest falls. So I need you to help me to understand that. What is the conflict of interest in this particular position?
Well, to be clear again, this is not regarding a person, so there's no questions about that. But however, we might one day have a school committee secretary who's also a superintendent secretary, and it could be a problem. Like, for example, sometimes our secretary has to lead meetings when we're discussing superintendent's concerns. Like, that wouldn't happen if we had a outside person. And also, not saying about this current secretary, but in the future we could have a secretary who might tell the superintendent what happens when we're discussing, for example, his evaluation, and that could be a conflict. And I just want to prevent that from happening. It does make sense, and I think this is a good policy, and I just don't see any reason to change it for one person. And I think our last secretary is a great secretary, but in principle, I think it would be wrong to change this.
Mr. Cornell, I would just like to educate you a little bit on this. The superintendent secretary has always handled the day-to-day operations, agendas, et cetera, even previous to this particular person, has always handled all of that. We had someone who took the minutes, and then the superintendent secretary did everything else. The superintendent secretary is now under that rule that was brought to our attention by the union out because we became aware of this. And I just don't understand how this is a conflict, because whenever we have discussed things having to do with the superintendent or others, we have always had the individual leave the room so that we discuss it amongst ourselves and we take the minutes. Mr. Testa.
Madam Chair, thank you. I think at the end of the day, whoever the secretary is to the school committee serves at the pleasure of the school committee. So if there's an individual that we feel is problematic, then we just wouldn't have that person as our secretary, right? So ultimately, it's not as if the superintendent picks the secretary for the school committee. Whoever is in that post would serve essentially at the pleasure of the school committee. The fact that the policy says they can't be an employee of the school department, I think puts a burden on trying to find someone to do that job. We like to have meetings. We have a lot of meetings, and that person has to be available at those meetings because there's a lot of work involved in a meeting. Now, maybe 40 years ago it was different. I wasn't even around 40 years ago in the city attending school committee meetings. But I have to believe that the amount of I've seen the amount of paperwork and things that have to be done to meet with open meetings laws and put packets together for us. It is a lot of hours, and the compensation isn't very much. So again, I don't see, for 40 years, I don't believe there's been a conflict. So I don't understand where it comes from and where the potential harm is, because at the end of the day, the school committee is the one that can decide that person is not here anymore. Nope, we're not using that person as a secretary. So ultimately we have the choice, we have the decision. So I just don't. I think we should amend the policy. I think it makes it more efficient to amend the policy. I don't have that jaded a view of the people who are employed within this district. I don't have a jaded view, I should say, of those that are employed here. That if it was a situation where it was a superintendent secretary who was a school committee secretary, that they couldn't perform that job confidentially to the standards that the school committee would set.
Exactly, Tester. And can I go and then you go?
Sure.
Thank you. So sometimes there are individuals who have all the skills along with all the bells and whistles and a confidential secretary, which is what the superintendent secretary is a professional. And we have had over the years, amazing confidential secretaries to the superintendent that have done these duties, that have worked with school committee members. And this policy just came out, but this practice has been going on for many, many years. So by saying, well, no one who is employed by the school department, doesn't say by the city, it's by the school department, can hold this job. And I've been racking my brain to figure out why that would be a problem. I mean, it gives us a much bigger and better pool of applicants if we put out for it, if people that understand our schools are interested in doing such duties. It's probably less expensive. And I would say, why limit the talent? Why limit the talent available to us? I think that's a crime, especially given that we've had such great confidential secretaries in this position to do this work. In addition, I need to make everybody aware that just like we could potentially do in in a meeting following this, this particular committee or any future committee, school committee in Warwick, has the ability to amend this policy or any other policy if we determine that there is a conflict of interest, if there is a problem. So if this is a problem and if it is a conflict of interest, we do not have to maintain that policy, and we can change it if we determine that there is one. In 40 years, there has not been a conflict. And we can add into this policy language that would make certain that anytime employee high administration level jobs that the superintendent oversees, or the superintendent himself, that we're the only ones in the room, and that we don't, we can take our own minutes. And in fact, we have in the past when we've wanted to conference in, privately amongst ourselves as our attorney and the committee, and everybody else leaves the room. So eventually, whatever we determine does come out of that meeting, that executive meeting, and the decision is made clear to the superintendent and sometimes to the public if it's not exclusively a personnel issue. So it's not like we would amend this and there was no opportunity to amend it if we found an issue in the future.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Cornell.
I have a suggestion. Perhaps we could split the position, like the preparations for the meetings could be done by maybe somebody who works with in the current administration in the school department, but the person that does the minutes works outside. So then we can ensure that we won't have that. That would make sure that conflict doesn't exist.
Where is the conflict, Mr. Cornell? You still haven't given me an example of a conflict.
Just how, like, for example, I was saying how, like, the secretary sometimes has to leave the room, like, while we're discussing, like, for example, superintendent's evaluation. Like, that's a problem. Like, if we have an outsider, they wouldn't have to do that. And they can still continue.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and they can still continue to do that. Meanwhile, but then we could have somebody in the school administration, like the previous secretary, do the preparation, which she has shown she is very good at. And then there isn't a conflict because she's not writing the minutes. She's just preparing the agenda, which is pretty much what this superintendent's job, and she's pretty much carrying that out. So, like, I would be okay if the position was split, but like, I just don't think the person doing the minutes should be somebody working for the school administration. I would like an outsider.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. We can agree to disagree. It has never been an issue, and people who, in the past, we've had people who took minutes who did not work for the school committee, and we asked them to leave. So it really is the prerogative of the committee and the duty of the chair to uphold the policy and principles and the confidentiality of the committee and of people's issues and privacy. So it really in 40 years has not been an issue, but thank you for your thoughts on this. Mr. Testa.
I think we might have lost him. Oh, never mind.
Mr. Testa. You're muted, hon. Mr. Testa. Oh, dear. Mr. Hennius, do you have anything?
I would simply remind the committee that this particular agenda item is not up for a vote tonight.
No, it is not.
Tonight would just be discussion.
Mr. Testa's back. You're muted. You're muted, Mr. Testa. We want to hear that voice.
I'm not sure if he can.
He's gonna write us a note.
I think he's doing a school project to
Maybe
show.
maybe he'll mime it, and we'll guess. Poor Mr. Test.
That would have been easy to mime.
I know, huh? You could try and do his voice, Kyle. Kyle, do you have anything for us?
I can't get that voice. I can understand where Nathan's coming from. I really do. But I do also understand where you, Mr. Tester, are coming from. I think what really, I just freaked out by the screen for a second, but
Yeah, me too. There's two of them.
Oh my God.
I'm back. It froze up on me. First
You're
time
back twice.
No, we still have you
Your
there.
twin is here.
This
Oh,
twin,
really?
David, you're the only one that's elected. What's your twin doing here?
He's the better looking one.
That's great.
I got a picture just to send to you, Dave.
I want one too.
Sorry. What I did want to go through is like, in amending the policy, what I would want is, going forward with any individual, I would want there to be a formal verbiage, I guess, that says, like at the discretion of the committee, like if any potential conflict or whatever it may be, comes up, that person is asked to leave or something of the sort.
Certainly, we could do that. And would you include that, Mr. Hennies? Thank you. Anyone further? Anything further? Okay, we will take this issue up tomorrow morning for a potential vote. The last item of new business under G is number 3, discussion action, potential posting of school committee secretary position.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Cornell.
I would like to make a motion to post this school committee secretary as soon as possible.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? There being no second, motion fails. There being no further discussion or business before this committee, I move that we adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Be
Thank you.
well. I'll see you all in the morning.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.